Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Garcia.
All right, welcome everybody. I am Justin James Garcia, and I am joined by Zen Garcia. What's going on, Dad?
Not much. I'm just enjoying the beautiful snow day. It was amazing, and it's been years and years since Georgia got snow like this to where it actually stuck and piled up and
hmm
covered the landscape in that fresh, just beautiful covering.
Yeah, we got some amazing footage with Eliana today. We went out back and we were by the chicken coop, and all the chickens were hanging out with us, and oh, it was so
So cool.
awesome. I was holding Eliana flat in my arms with her belly down, and we had this tree stump that was just covered. It was like knuckle deep of snow, not much, but for Georgia, that's more than you ever see, right?
Right.
But we were able to put Eliana's hands in the snow, and it left a handprint. It was just so cute.
So good.
And you could just see like going through her mind. She's like touching snow. She's like, "What is
Right.
this?" But
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, so this video is titled "A Week in Review," and for most of you, you probably know we do a weekly summary. We did skip last week since we just had a couple AMAs, but this week we had some pretty good shows. Starting off on Wednesday night, I actually was able to join with my dad for our continuation of the Revelation study, and we went through Revelation chapter 8, and we covered a little bit of Revelation chapter 9. It was a really interesting look. We saw the opening of the seventh seal, and we saw the seven trumpets, and then some of the trumpets that were being blown. And we had a really great discussion. There's just so many different perspectives and ways that you can try to fit all of the prophecies together, especially, when we brought in the Old Testament sources along with things like the Revelation of St. John the Theologian, which is a Greek Orthodox version of the Revelation. And yeah, it was really interesting. What was some of your takeaways?
I was just thinking that we did this one on Thursday, and I was on with
Oh yeah,
Aaron
no, you're totally right.
on Wednesday. Yeah, but yeah, the Revelation show was incredible as always, and there was a lot of information that we were able to bring forth. That especially with the opening of the seals and the wrath of God, the judgment, the catching away, the harpazo, all of that, and the way that it ties and seems to unite together. Incredible study in Revelation is such an interesting book, and I was able to also share some of the Hopi prophecies and some from the Colburn Bible on the destroyer and the purifier and how it seems to fit in with wormwood and even with the ancient aliens, and that's the Antichrist and those characters released from the bottomless pit, the supernatural
hmm
aspect of all of that. And it did show in, the commentary of the prophecies that I read from as well, from, the Colburn as well as the Hopi prophecies on the last cry of the last days. So, yeah, I thought it was a really incredible show and one that would be of great benefit for anybody that's looking into and trying to understand better the
hmm
revelation of our Bible.
Yeah, the Hopi prophecies were really shocking, in my opinion. I don't understand how they could write something that would line up so perfectly with biblical prophecy. Like
Hmm.
it was just so descriptive, and so much of what they mentioned fits right in with Revelation. So yeah, definitely glad that you brought that one forward. And yeah, you can check that one out for yourselves. It's the Hopi were an Indian tribe, and what there was an actual name of the prophecies or the book you were reading. What was the name of that one?
Last Cry is the name of the book, and And then the Robert White Wolf, I believe is his name, or Robert Ghost Wolf. He was the one. He was one of a very long line of native elders that had passed the prophecy down orally, and then he, finally did write it and share it in that particular book. But it's said to be very ancient, and so
Hmm.
yeah, very interesting, especially with the way that that one particular part where it talks about how they would ask the rocks to fall on them to hide them or to
Hmm.
you know
Yeah.
and how that fits in with Revelation 6, I believe. So yeah, the very interesting.
Yeah, and they also talked about hybrid beings and like portals
Right,
being unlocked for extra dimensional creatures coming back to the earth, right? And then,
right.
yeah, there was just some really intense stuff. It kind of makes me wonder. Of course, we're talking about tribes people that go back for a long, long time. Native Americans, they were here until, the 1700s by themselves, right? But
Hmm.
it makes me kind of look at the Mao people of China. There were
Uh-huh.
there were apostles that were sent out there during like the first or second century AD. And these were like original Christian apostles that went and they shared the gospel. They shared, the entire story from Adam to the Messiah to the death and the resurrection. And these people, the Mao Chinese people, they lived on their own. There wasn't a church. They didn't have a Bible. They didn't have anything like that. But I think it was in the early 1900s, there were British missionaries that went there, and some of the people would pull the British missionaries to the side and they said, we've heard very similar things, but we don't have like a written book or anything. It's just things that our ancestors passed down to us. So for like 1800 years or howsoever long, they just had an oral version of the gospel that was passed down between their families. So I wonder if this was like a Christian missionary went and like carried revelation, and end time prophecies to these people, and then they just kind of maintained it on their own and passed it down orally for, you know, almost 2,000 years. Interesting, regardless, because we know that all over the world there are these prophecies of end times prophecies. It's just crazy to me that it lines up so well with the Bible and biblical
Yeah.
prophecy.
Well, truth is truth, and I think that people have received from the Most High, the prophecy in their own regard. And it's not necessarily even that somebody brought it to them or that, they received it from some person. I think that divine inspiration is given to all people everywhere, and that the truth is the truth, and that the Most High has revealed such things to all people everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. And there was a question in the chat from Young Willie. Shout out to everybody who's in the chat. Good to see you all today. Young Willie said, "Were there not Chinese writings about Noah and his sons?" And there might have been. I know that there is a mention of the Miao people, the Miao people. You can do a search for them, but I don't know if it was written, but they had an entire story of the Bible, basically like summarized version of the Bible, but it was just passed down orally. And I think it might have been written down, of course, in recent times and published, for people like us to be able to study and see what they had passed down. But actually, even in the actual Chinese language itself, in the
Yes,
original
right.
language, the traditional letters, there are a lot of biblical principles that are laid out in the way that they use their language. So the written language of China is unlike any language that most of us have ever studied. They don't have letters like A, B, C, D, and they don't fit together like, like my name is Justin, and it's made of those letters, right? And that each letter kind of has a sound, but that's not how it is in the traditional written Chinese language. They're more of like a hieroglyphic language, and each word is a combination of symbols, and the basic symbols are called radicals, and they're made up of uh, the base words are like man or mankind, or something like one, two, three, four. There's sun, moon, and basic things like tree. Like very basic words, and then all of the big words are made up of combinations of these radicals, but they're put together into one symbol, and they don't sound anything like. There's no sound that follows. They can sound however. But the point is that you can look this up for yourself, I believe, on YouTube. It's like God in Ancient China, and there's a presentation where this guy breaks down all of the radicals that are in words like for big boat or like ark. The word for ark is it's the radical for mouth, and then the radical for eight, and then the radical for boat. So you see the story, like you said, Willie, the writings about Noah and his sons right there. You see the flood story in the word for an ark or a large boat. It's eight mouths, which represents, or it's mouth and then eight and then boat, which represents eight mouths on a boat. And you look back at the Bible, there's no like explanation. Why would you just have the number eight and then the word for, the radical for mouths, and then the radical for boat? Boat we understand, but why the eight in the mouths? And you look at the Bible and okay, well, eight people were preserved through the flood on the boat, on the large boat, right? So, and you also look at the word for like deception, and it's like tree in a garden with a man or something like that. There are all types of really interesting looks at the Chinese language and how they preserve the biblical teachings. They also originally did worship one God, but of course, as we know now, they claim descendancy from dragons, and we know that bloodline and the power that they have in the world right now. But yeah, really interesting to consider all of these things, and especially the Hopi prophecies that we covered with the Revelation study. That was an awesome study. Definitely check that one out. We also had a really cool show with Sister Erin Moffat on Wednesday, and that was a little bit about end time prepping.
Yeah.
Anything you wanted to bring forth from that show?
Yeah, that it was interesting in that we were just talking about community and how it reminded me of the book of the Order of the Ancients and the manuscript that was written by Elijah the Tishbite, the prophet, and how in that manuscript it also talks about community and coming together and caring for each other and one another in a communal type of a way, and also in preserving um, the integrity of not only the elders but the tribe as a whole, making sure that the leaders and the elders that they were worthy and deserving of a role of leadership and preserving the direction and guidance of the people in moving forward, into the future. And so that is interesting because we see is even in the establishment of the church, the ecclesia initially by the apostles, that they seem to have followed in some way those kind of precepts, those kind of fundamentals. And it makes you wonder as to whether they had, in some way, writings or the manuscript of Elijah, or some kind of ordinance which gave them the idea of following what he had written about in this ancient manuscript. And so Very interesting. And then you also see, like with the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Essenes and the Qumran community, how they separated themselves, um, and tried to, in the same manner, living communally amongst one another and taking care of each other and everybody sharing everything in equity. Um, it seems that they also had, in some manner, been influenced by um, similar writings, teachings, direction as far as their elders and following, whatever they were trying to set up. And so, yeah, loose connections, very interesting, and we cover a lot of other stuff as well in that, so people can check that out for themselves.
Yeah, always a great time to have Sister Erin on. So really interesting text as well, with the Book of the Order of the Ancients and really the early church and yeah, how you mentioned the Essenes. There's so much mystery around that, right? Like
Hmm.
were they original church? Like were they the Jerusalem church that like separated themselves and went and hid themselves in the mountains as the Messiah told them to do? When before the destruction of the temple, not really sure, but there definitely seems to have been some Christian text over there, and yeah, there's a lot of mystery, and it's really tragic that the Israeli Antiquity Authority they have hidden so much from us and prolonged for so long. The release of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the publicizing of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Thankfully, a lot of scholars have worked together to make sure that we have gotten copies of a lot of that, but there's still so much to be uncovered. And
Right,
one of the ones that I love the most is the Testaments of the Patriarchs that's contained in there
right,
because you see the prophecies of the Messiah. You also see how the tribe of the Levites would betray the Messiah. And, of course, as we're told in the gospel, from the resurrection, there and even before, there's been a large effort to hide the truth of who the Messiah
yeah,
is, of what he's done. And we know that the enemy doesn't want people to come to know the truth. But uh, we'll move on to.
Oh, one other thing.
Oh, go ahead.
With since you brought this up, with the mention of the Qumrani community and some of the truths that were preserved there, we know that the book of Enoch also was one of the most, as
Hmm.
far as copies, and as far as that there were said to be two Aramaic copies in full extent that were found there. But of course, we get the fragmented, minuscule pieces, and those two full
Hmm.
copies were said to be sold on the black market into private hands, and we don't have any kind of redemption of
Hmm.
all of that information. Which, well, oh my gosh, I can just imagine the kind of truths that could have came forward if we were to have Aramaic versions of
Yeah.
those ancient teachings.
Yeah, that would
How
be
mind blowing
so
that would.
amazing.
Yeah,
For sure to be able to hold up the Book of Enoch in the Aramaic and look at the Book of Enoch that was preserved in the Ethiopic would be
yeah.
so amazing. But it is, even the little portions of Enoch that were
Oh yeah, it
preserved
was true
are
blessing.
huge, are huge.
The Son of Man,
Chapter
you
6
know.
with the fall of the angels
Yes,
and the Nephilim.
yeah. The rebellion,
I think
the fall of the
that
Watchers.
in itself has probably woken up a lot of people.
Yes, absolutely.
But let's move
Oh,
on
but the
to.
Son of Man.
Oh, go ahead.
Just really
Mhm.
quickly, all the prophecies of the Son of Man, yeah, as far as Christ and the Messianic, that the Dead Sea Scrolls proved that the Book of Enoch was prophetic, and that the teachings of the coming of Christ and as the Son of Man are very important, very relevant, and shows even what the Targum, because a lot of people tried to say that the Targum are much older than what they are because they also contain prophetic passages speaking about the coming of Christ and how he would be Savior Messiah. So, very important to consider as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure of which specific passage was preserved in the Dead Sea Scrolls that refers to the Son of Man. So you're saying there is a fragment that
Yeah,
was
there's
found that
numerous.
contains it?
Right. Yeah, there's actually numerous. And if you look into the collected works of Enoch that we put out, all of those fragments are contained in there as well. The copies of what was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So. But yeah, there's a lot that
Hmm.
has to do with the Son of Man.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'll have to check that out again. I know that I've read it a lot of times. I don't remember that. I'm definitely gonna have to check that out again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's move on to Saturday. And we did our Digital Readers Club study. That was just yesterday. And it was a great study again, going through from chapter 100. We completed that infamous chapter 100 of the Fall of the Angels in the
How
Cavern of
awesome was
Goss.
it?
And then we moved on through the next few chapters, and it's definitely, it contained a lot of Greek, or not Greek, but Eastern Orthodox narrative. They were talking about the worship of angels, the worship of the idol wood of the cross, and then also the worship of Mary, which we don't ascribe to. But it also had some interesting history that was in there. We did have one question from the chat from Swixt. Do you believe that the ark is really held in Ethiopia? The Cavern of Goss says Menelik stole it from Solomon and brought it to Ethiopia. Also, what do you think is preventing Israel from taking it back?
I think that it's an interesting consideration, and that the manuscript does suggest that this was the case, and that even in the Cavern of Goss, Solomon and all of his, his court, and those that were of the instrumental in preserving prophetically, and also uh, the Lady Zion, and that had a part to play in the royal court of Solomon. They all agreed to keep this a secret and to not let it be known, and that it was replaced according to the manuscript. And um, the fact that Solomon lost it, and that it was uh, at the direction of the Most High that Menelik um, take it and leave with the Lady of Zion, as they call it, to take the Ark of the Covenant out of Israel because they were no longer deserving of having and preserving it. And so that's when the Ethiopic church, and we see even the supernatural churches in Lali Baba, or how they were said to be carved from the stone by the angels in a single night. Um, that there's something to that as well. And I think that perhaps the reception of the Ark of the Covenant and then these supernatural churches being established there were part of the groundwork, the framework, the foundation of Christianity, and the knowledge that is the faith that was based upon the Torah and the coming of the Messiah, and how he would be redeemer, and that salvation would be through him. This is the core tenets of our faith and what became Christianity, that it was established there, in a manner that we see even now, that the Ethiopians are dedicated and very faithful, um, disciples of Christianity and the faith. So I do think that those kind of things show that there maybe is something to that story that a lot of people have and never considered, and don't know much about. And so, my opinion.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting consideration. A lot of people are talking about Ron Wyatt, of course, and I just have to mention, even in the Cabernet of Goss, it said at one point that there was a vision that this guy had of Mary in paradise, and that the Ark of the Covenant was next to Mary. And we do see in Revelation that the temple of the tabernacle is open, and the Ark of the Covenant descends from heaven to the earth. So who knows? There's a lot of speculation. Tammy said that she thinks the Messiah is the Ark of the Covenant. There's definitely there's some symbolism there, but there was an Ark of the Covenant in the wilderness, that was made of
Mhm.
made of wood covered with gold, and that housed the Ten Commandments and the manna. So, yeah, interesting to consider where it is now, but we know where it will be in the end.
Yeah.
It will.
One comment on the whole Ron Wyatt as well. In again my consideration of this text and thinking about it, if the ark is the original left with Menelik and was established in Ethiopia, and there's said to be a church there that has been watching over generationally, caring for, and that there's a line of priests from a particular family that has been established as guardian caretaker over this particular ark. That it could be that the ark that Warren Wyatt had discovered in Jerusalem would be the one that Solomon had recreated afterwards, because this was still a holy relic, and even though it wasn't the original, it was still established and placed into the Holy of Holies, and was the ones that Israel had utilized thereafter. And so, the priesthood and all that still uh, used it, even though it was a replacement, as a holy relic. It may not be, you know, containing the original Ten Commandments, or, what was said to be in the original ark, which I can't remember exactly what Ron Wyatt had said about what was in the container of the Ark of the Covenant when he discovered it. But certainly this one was said to have had the blood of the Messiah um, on the top of it from when the earth cracked, and this is a prophecy that's also found in the first book of Adam and Eve, that it speaks about how Christ told Adam that that his blood would come upon his head, and that the only way that makes sense to me is that that when he bled on the cross, that if it went down with the earthquake into the crack, that somehow coming to the Ark of the Covenant, that maybe Adam's body was also somewhere there, contained, buried, I don't know. But there is a prophecy in the primary Adamic literature which is connected to that as well.
Yeah, really interesting considerations. So, yeah, I think that's it for the weekly summary for the work that we went through, the radio shows that we did this last week. Just to comment on the persecution that the saints are undergoing right now. There was, I believe it was a whole village in South Sudan that was wiped out by jihadists, an entire Christian village. And there was a pastor in, I believe it was Pakistan, that has been imprisoned for blasphemy against uh, Islam, and they announced that they're going to execute him. So that's something that is really taking place in a lot of places in the world. People are being persecuted and killed for their faith. So, let's always remember to keep them in our prayers. And I pray that we would have strength, and, if we do one day face that same type of persecution, I would definitely keep them in your prayers. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining for the weekly summary, Dad, and thank you everybody else for joining. We'll see you throughout the week. Any last comments?
Yeah, the last thing is that we were asked to pray for those that were taken and kidnapped in the Dallas synagogue, and thank God that they were released without being hurt, and that only the terrorists who had a brother that was a terrorist and that was being held, that he was the only one that was taken out as far as and the other people were safe, and so thank God for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It was relieving to see that as well. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining. I love you all so much, and prayerfully we will see you throughout the week. And tomorrow we're going to be sending out our mid-month newsletter, and I think we're going to be highlighting the calendar that my dad is working on. So that
should be done very soon. At least by the end of the week is my focus.
Yeah, so the 2022 Enochian lunisolar calendar, we should be able to get the text done or the content done by the end of the week. Then we will expedite a copy from our printer to ourselves to make sure everything looks good. And then we'll be fulfilling the pre-order. So the pre-order is available at sacredwordpublishing.com. Check that out. And also, we're still running the 22% off discount. I think the promo code is year 22. Let me look real quick. So it's it's 22YEAR, all capital letters, number 22YEAR, so 22 year, and you can get 22% off all books and ebooks at sacredwordpublishing.com. And remember, 10% of all proceeds go to the Endeavor Freedom Orphanage, and we've made a lot of headway with growing the orphanage. Definitely follow along the journey at facebook.com/EndeavorFreedomINC. And yeah, that's it for me. And I think thank God for all of you. We really love you all.
Yes.
And we'll see you throughout the week.
Be blessed all. Good night. Love you, son.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Thank you everybody for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.